Thanks, Steiner. Really good to be here. Okay. hmm hmm Uh, I don't know. That's a good question. I think that uh, there are plenty of, I think we both live in what I consider one of the greatest cities of the world. And I think that there is a lot to talk about because we share that. And I don't know, I know you and know what a curious and conversational human being you are. So there wasn't a whole lot of baggage behind it. It was just like, yeah, that makes sense. And that you're doing this and secondhand talent. It just kind of felt like it was, uh, an exploratory thing. I don't know. I didn't put too much thought behind it because it just made so much sense that you were doing something like this. I wish that yeah, sorry it was more complex. Right. Aw. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm. Mhm. That's cool, man. Yeah, that was a different era. And I saw you interviewed John Amatrano, and yeah, he was such a part of the vibe there too, uh, and I'm proud of that we cracked his tough exterior, and that he went from being dismissive to us to uh, genuinely being a friend. I get what being a doorman at a club, how that must wear you down to some degree and stuff like that. And I think he's also naturally just a person who exists on the cloudier side of life. And uh, he became a friend and a part of that whole thing. The Abbey pub was such an interesting place and has such a fascinating history. I heard that it's coming back to life, but I've heard that a lot. I've heard that many times. Uh, Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah, you're it's what an interesting place. I have a funny uh story about my so when I moved to Chicago in 99. I grew up in upstate New York, but ended up, as most late teenagers do, needing to get away from my hometown. And so I moved to Chicago, and it was like couple months after I got here is when I discovered the banjo, and became kind of voraciously excited about it, and started learning how to play. And every week I would grab the reader out of the newspaper box in Uptown on Thursdays, and I'd look through the reader for any kind of listing for a show that sounded like it might have some kind of bluegrass vibe in it. And I found pretty quickly, I found Cornmeal, and they were playing on Wednesdays at the Abbey. So this was at the time, I think. Yeah, so we're talking 2001. Okay. And so I remember going to the Abbey, and it was early times for cornmeal. Like, this was back when Wavy Dave was literally making a pan of cornbread every week, and bringing it to the shore. Yeah, man. Yeah, yeah. And I remember going that night and just not knowing anybody, and hearing the band and just kind of being like blown away. And I have this funny I met Wavy, I met Chris Ganji, and I was like, I'm a banjo player, and Chris was like, oh, bring your banjo next week. We're starting a jam session in the parking lot during the set breaks, and I was like, great. And so I brought my banjo. This must have been 2002 or three. Um, and during the set break, this is crazy. During the set break, a handful of people went out to the parking lot, and there was a jam session in the lot across the street from the door, if you can picture it. And we're sitting there playing, and about three or four songs into it, I'm just feeling like this is it, dude. I'm playing. There were like Wavy was there, some of the some of the other members of the band, and some other, and I was just like feeling it. I was like, this is, not my first jam session, but certainly early enough for me to still be like, I can't believe I'm playing music with people. And it gets to my turn to pick a tune, and I remember the tune that I picked. It was Earl's Breakdown, which was one of the few tunes I knew from start to finish. And I kicked it off, and it went around the circle. It came time for me to take another solo, and I'm not kidding you. Out of the sky, uh, a bird flew over and shit on my fingers, but my picking fingers, and everybody, yeah, 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 everybody saw it too. So the whole thing stopped, and everybody was just like, and I was devastated. Like, this was way too early in my playing and just youth to see something as funny as it was, and I was like embarrassed, and then I remember Chris. Oh, totally. Right. And Chris Ganji, and he those everybody who was there remembers this, of course. And Chris Ganji was like, everybody's laughing, and he stops, and he looks at his watch, he goes, well, it's time for us to go back and start the second set anyways. And I was just like, no. Yeah, it was. Yeah. And then a pigeon shit on my fingers. And yeah. Uh-huh. Hmm. So I grew up in a little town called Homer, New York, and which is right in the middle of New York State. It's central New York. It's about 25 minutes from Ithaca and about 40 minutes from Syracuse, right in between those two towns. And it's a beautiful, beautiful part of New York State, the Finger Lakes region. Yeah, yeah, it really was I especially looking back, I really loved growing up there, surrounded by really amazing nature and it's a great part of the country and that I love more now than I did back then, as what happens with you when move away from things. But music was only it was part of my life, but not anywhere close to what it is now. My mom a flautist. She plays the flute, so I was always surrounded by her being in local orchestras, and she always insisted that I do choir. I have an older brother who made take piano lessons. He didn't like it, so they didn't force me to do that, and I wish they had, honestly. But my real music contact up through high school was choir, and I loved singing, and I'm glad that at least I did that. But I didn't play an instrument at all, really, until I played a little bit of chords on guitar before I moved out to Chicago. But yeah, so I went to college for one semester after high school, and got a zero point 0, majored in LSD. That's what I like to say. Like, I discovered acid. Yeah, right, right. Mystery achievement. Uh, and like, I remember after that semester, it was like a little tiny private college in Rochester. And I remember my parents sitting me down and being like, well, the school's going to take you back, but you're going to be on academic probation, and this is what it's going to look like. And both my parents are educators, so they were devastated. And I was just like, you know what, guys, I don't think I want to go back. I remember telling them that. I was like, this is, they had paid, we had taken out loans, and they had paid for a significant portion of that one semester. And I was finally, I think, mature enough to recognize, like, I shouldn't be going to school because it's not something that I'm interested in. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I got an apartment instead of going back to college, and kind of didn't do a whole lot in my hometown for a couple of years. Yeah. uh, they took my school was had a really robust music program in high school, and so we had a great music teacher, and he every year we'd do the Handel's Messiah, and I loved it. It's funny now because I look back, and I really wanted to be a bass singer because all the guys I looked up to were the guys like if I was a sophomore and they were seniors, they were all so cool in my eyes, and they were all big dudes with deep voices, and so I was like, no, I'm a bass, just like those guys. But I'm not. It's funny now that I sing, I know that I'm more of a tenor or a baritone. but I always sang the bass part, and I still remember it uh, because we did it every year for like 4 years. But that's such a beautiful piece to, 40, 50 people singing it. And uh, it is just it is an incredible thing to be part of that, a choir singing the Messiah. And I had no connection to it religion wise or anything. It's just a beautiful multi-part singing choir to be a part of. So that's what I remember about it. That's cool. Aw. Yeah, the human voice is uh is a powerful instrument, man. It just is. Yeah, and I was in choir to like socialize more than anything. Like that was where my friends were. It was in the music building, and that was my community in high school. But and that was great, but it also gave me a understanding, at least on a feel level, about how the voice can work in a group. And that's a big part of bluegrass, is like vocal harmony is a huge part of bluegrass. And it ended up, 10 years later, giving me a solid foundation for learning bluegrass vocals. And I'm grateful for that. It was complete coincidence, but it is what gave me a foundation to work with on that front. So, um, no, you're good. No, 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 you're fine, dude. Shut up. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No. My brother doesn't work it. And I work in a different way where my own voice is not like that. So, you know, it feels awesome. Yeah, and I think it's interesting to hear you talk about. I don't know, man. Like, I think that we all want to express ourselves creatively, uh, and I know that feeling that you're talking about. It's like there was there's something I can identify with that because I definitely had this kind of blind urge as I hit my 20s to be like, well, I want to create something with people, and to me it was, I think, because I had some of that early music background, it made sense to me. Plus, I moved here and I was immediately surrounded by other people playing music, and I was just like, well, it didn't feel unattainable for me to try, but I think I was also dumb. Like, you don't realize how much work it takes to get good at an instrument, like, or I was young enough to be like, that's cool. I've got the rest of my life to do this. Yeah. Yeah, I have mixed feelings about all of that, and literally, like, very mixed, because I agree with that. I feel like I was fortunate to, because when I moved here and I bought that first banjo, uh I didn't I mean, I was in such a different, interesting place in my life where I was, um let me give you just a little bit of context. But I want to continue talking about that. But uh, I moved out here because, um, when I was like 17, 18, my dad took me to West Africa, uh, and uh, and it was a big wake up call for me. My dad's an African historian, retired, but he specialized in this tiny little part of West Africa called the Gambia, and that was his thing. Uh, and he took me there when I guess I was maybe 19. And I came back from that trip with my kind of mind blown open. I don't think, not a whole lot of Americans get to go to that part of the world and understand it at a young age. Not that I understood it, but at least experience it. And I came back feeling like, I wanted to do something different with my life, and that's what eventually kind of pushed me to move to Chicago. I was like, I just wanted to be more connected to the world around me and do it. And that wasn't going to happen in a small town in upstate New York. Um, and I think that, believe it or not, that is connected to what we were just talking about. It's like, I do talk to a lot of younger musicians who are like, I want to be a performer. How do I do that? And I'm like, where do you live? And they're like, well, I live in, I'm 30 minutes from Cincinnati or something. And I'm like, move to Cincinnati. Like, well, okay, sure. It is. No, I mean, so there was an opportunity out here, and that was okay. to be honest with you, I came back from West Africa, and this I feel like this is almost cliche, but I do feel like when privileged people, of which I am, get a chance to see how the rest of the world lives, or a huge chunk of the rest of the world lives, it had a profound effect on me. Like the abject poverty that I witnessed in West Africa. Uh, and it wasn't all that way. I mean, culturally, that's such a fascinating part of the world. And I just love going to that part of the world. I've been blessed to be able to go there repeatedly, but it is so profoundly different from my existence, that when I came back, I was like, I need to do something more meaningful with my life than work at a grocery store and get stoned every day. And so I met this woman who worked at this place up in Oswego, New York. Long story short, I got involved with this thing called the Catholic Worker Movement, which has been around since the 1930s, started by a woman named Dorothy Day, who was a communist. Uh, and the whole foundation of that movement is living the living the words of Christ. And I'm not a religious person. I never have been. But I've always identified with uh, the works of mercy, which is uh, serving the poor, visiting the imprisoned, clothing the cold, feeding the hungry. Uh, this kind of existence of knowing what you have and using what you have to lift other people up. And that spoke to me so deeply after coming back from Africa, which I thought it is such a cliche. I do feel that way. It's like a privileged white kid from America sees poor people in Africa and wants to do something about it. But regardless, that's what happened. Uh, for sure. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, but that's I think um the juxtaposition, or you can find that big of a gap between people's life experiences here too. It's a little bit different, but I totally associate with what you're talking about. and that's what I moved here to do, was to witness that here. Because I moved here, I had this opportunity to move to this house in Uptown, called St. Francis House, still there. I still go there occasionally. That has, for since the 1970s, been serving the poor in Uptown. And I lived there for several years in community. Like, I slept in a dorm room with homeless men. Eventually got my own room there, but I wanted to face that stuff. That's what I came back from Africa, and I was like, I wanted to see and witness and be amongst that stuff. And there's a connection between this and the banjo. Like, I moved to that house in August of '99, and my job was to just be there. Like, we served dinner 4 or 5 nights a week, to about 100 people every night, and other than that, my job was just to be there, and I lived in community with those folks. And so I moved there in August. In October, I was walking down Lincoln Avenue, and I knew there were musicians at that house, and I was getting tapped into the music community. And I just remember having this blind drive to play an instrument. And I recognized that if I played the guitar, everybody played the guitar. And so I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to play, but I got to find something else. And I had just gotten paid. I was taking care of a friend of a friend's father, who was old and needed help. And she paid me well. And uh, she made me $20 an hour in 1999. Uh, which was, yeah, that was crazy for a kid without a college degree. I bet you're right. I bet you're right. And so she had just paid me a couple $100. I was walking down Lincoln Avenue, walked by the Old Town School, and in the window was a $200 banjo. It said $199, and I walked into the Old Town School without too much thought, and said to the guy at the counter, like, "Hey, $199 banjo. I have $200. If you can give it to me without tax, I'll walk out with it." And he like turned around and looked at his boss, and his boss nodded his head, and they went and got it, and gave me the banjo. And I remember taking that banjo back to the Catholic Worker House in Uptown, and feeling, I was like, this is it. Like, this is my thing now. And I don't want to romanticize it, but I absolutely knew that that was going to be my thing. And I remember taking it out of its cheap little case and putting it on a couch and just looking at it and having no clue how to play it, how to hold it. But I was just like, this is it. Uh, and that house, and the fact that my just being there was me doing my job, meant that for the next couple of years I could practice 6 hours a day, and be doing my job. I sat on that porch in Uptown, and practiced and drove people crazy. But just by the nature of being there, I was, and like, I was stopping people from smoking crack on the porch. And, just like being part of the right. And like, they just wouldn't, because I was there. Where if I wasn't there doing that, all sorts of chaos happened at that place. It was delightful and terrifying at the same time. Um, so I owe a lot to that house and that experience. And there's no question that those experiences there pushed me to do continue to want to face reality in life. And when, this is jumping forward, but, starting the band and all that was one thing. But then when we started getting these opportunities to play music in other parts of the world, I saw it as more of an opportunity to be an anthropologist than to be a performer sometimes, if that makes sense. Like, uh, I just love experiencing different how people live in the world, and whether that's in uptown Chicago or in Uzbekistan, yeah, or Gambia for sure.
So you find this banjo, you're looking at it on the couch, and you're thinking to yourself, this is it. You're already, way ahead of the game by getting on the stoop before the crackheads can get there. You're making moves. When did the band come together? And you talked a little bit earlier about jamming, but when was it that you had the decision, were like, hey, like, this is a group of people that we want to make music together?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of hazy on some of the steps that go between jam sessions and band stuff. Like, I know at one point, I mean, I wanted to play. There was a small bluegrass scene, and I was starting to meet people from it at jam sessions and stuff. And then there was a couple of bands. I got invited to play with this band called the Back Porch Ramblers, and eventually I got kind of let go from that band because uh okay, I remember one night I was in Rogers Park and I walked into the Red Line Tab, and there was a band playing that was really loud, and the lead singer sang a song about Syracuse, and I was like, that's a cool song. And this band has enough country music vibe that I could see myself playing with them. And I introduced myself to them. They were called the Outlaw Family Band. And I said, this is me, like, with my gumption. I was just like, I play the banjo. You guys need a banjo. Where do you practice? And nobody in that band had the social wherewithal to tell me, like, no. Uh, and they told me where they practiced and when they practiced. And I, in over the next couple of days, I like called my mom. I borrowed some money from her and I bought an electric banjo, and I showed up to their practice and started playing with the Outlaw Family Band, which was very much like drums, electric guitar, and they had a fiddle player. And I started playing banjo with them, and started touring with that band. I mean, it was not like big touring, but it was a great first foray into it. And that was my first real band. And because that was rock and roll, I still had this urge inside me to play bluegrass. And the lead guitar player, James, the songwriter who wrote the song Syracuse, he outplayed the dobro and the fiddle player, and so we started a side project to play bluegrass outside of, but that band was the main focus. Like, that Outlaw Family Band was going to be the band, but that side project, bluegrass band, is what became the Henhouse Prowlers. And we started playing Tuesdays in multiple venues, including the Abbey pub. And that was kind of, eventually that band became more able to be a business than the other band for a myriad of reasons. And like, that's the short version of how we started a bluegrass band in Chicago. Was it started as a rock and roll thing, and that pushed us all to want to play more acoustic music. Um, and it's kind of took off from there. I think I learned a lot of lessons in that first band about consensus, like how important I think that is, to at least attempt consensus when you're in a band with people. So, because it helps people feel a group ownership of things. And I've tried to carry that spirit with me for the past 21 years, being in a band. at varying points of success. But it's come around big time in the last 6 or 7 years because, knock on wood, we've kept the same lineup with with some really amazing musicians, and so and that to me it is much more. It's much easier to make good music when you're all on the same page and you're all in it together, for better or for worse. And I feel really grateful to play with these guys that I'm with now because we figured out a common goal, and we care about each other and support each other, and that has become a huge part of what we do.
And
Yeah,
on top of that, you guys just love music. I mean,
yeah.
it exudes from you. I remember, y'all were the first bluegrass band I ever saw. I didn't know what bluegrass was. I mean, I learned about, Yonder, rest in peace to Jeff, miss
Mm-hmm.
you, buddy. A little bit, shortly thereafter, but I saw the name and I was like, oh, I got to check these guys out. I wonder what, and it was not what I expected. It was blue. And it's just these guys like playing all these instruments that I had never seen played before on stage. Certainly not all together. I couldn't even name some of them at the time. Like I didn't know what a dobro was. Like I didn't know what a ukulele, like, I mean, a banjo, like, I mean, I knew what they were, but I had no
Mm-hmm.
familiarity or anything with them. But, you know, you know, something that you said about how that it was still a little too rockish and you wanted it to be a little bit more bluegrassy. I think that your bluegrass rocks. And when you take a song like Syracuse, which is one of my favorite songs, by the way,
Yeah.
that one specific, like it's my happens to be Steiner's favorite song of yours as well. Um, it's it's I feel like that's the bluegrass that set the template for bands like Sacred Hollow and Kitchen Dwellers and these other bands that are coming up, today. It really was eye-opening for me because I don't think was familiar with the term bluegrass until I saw you guys play. Did you
Yeah,
get
I
that a
mean
lot? Were a lot of, was that because I'm curious, like, it's like when you guys like started really playing out, like, were there people who were just like, you were into the bluegrass scene, or were you rapping in other people because of based on, your connections and
Yeah,
such?
I think we were. I mean, Chicago has a really interesting history with bluegrass music that a lot of people don't know about. But that's minutia for nerds. Uh, in the grand scheme of things, if you're playing at a neighborhood bar, uh, you're going to expose a lot of people to bluegrass for the first time, just like and sure, there is a scene of people here, but you got to look for it if you're into it. Otherwise, you have to stumble across it, and so I think a lot of people in those first 10 years, we were the only bluegrass they'd ever seen because we're not in Kentucky, we're not in North Carolina, where it is in every neighborhood bar and stuff. The cornmeal was doing their thing and we were doing our thing, but it was two bands out of 500 or more in the city. And so now I'm proud and excited to say that there's a lot more going on now than there was back then. But that was it back then. Other than the occasional band that would come through, like Yonder, um, who I remember seeing at the Abbey pub in like 2001 or two. Um, and so other than that, that's what was going on here, bluegrass wise. And so I'm I, at the time you didn't realize it, but how cool was it to be a lot of people's first bluegrass music, and I, I relished that I had the opportunity. I wish I don't know. I wish I knew it at the time, but what a cool thing to look back on.
I
You know,
always think of that lyric from Faces. I wish I knew now what I knew when I was younger, something of the such. But
right, right.
but just to validate that it's true. Like you were the foundation for modern Chicago bluegrass, and it's really hard to see those things at the time. But I know so many people in the Chicago scene who were so heavily influenced by your band and incorporate. I no, I'm serious, and I know this because these are conversations I've had with people. The way you attack your instruments when you're on stage and come up to that mic, you perform like no one I've ever seen. Like that's really, and that's the truth.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's hard to face that sometimes. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that there were plenty of people who inspired us. And I mean, just last night, I was at a party, holiday party that's been going on for decades that had the forefathers of bluegrass and acoustic music here in Chicago at it. And there were people who absolutely inspired me. Greg Cahill was there, Al Day was there, Michael Miles was there,
Wow.
all inspirational, both banjo and guitar players and songwriters. Robbie Fulks is, I think, one of the most genius songwriters ever, and he, made his career here. There is a cool history here, but we were the band that was playing every week on Tuesdays. We were, and that was, I think, directly related to what level of success we've been able to achieve, is that we played every Tuesday for a decade. And the philosophy was, if we are consistent with that, people will come out. And, it was like, it's Tuesday, I'm going to go see Bluegrass, and I know it's going to be there. So if I don't go this Tuesday, I can go next Tuesday. And it was like, I don't know, that was what allowed us to, I think in the 10 years that we played Tuesdays, we may have missed 3 in 10 years, either due to holidays or illness. But there was a Christmas that landed on a Tuesday that we played Christmas night. And I remember being like, oh, this is stupid. We shouldn't do this. No one's going to come. And it ended up being one of the best Tuesdays ever, because everybody was like, it's Christmas Day. I need to get away from my family.
Yeah.
And it was
I need
slammed
somewhere to be, and if there's music there, even better. Like,
right, totally, yeah.
but no,
So,
absolutely, that consistency, and for me, because I recall seeing the names of the bands that were around that I was paying attention to when I was younger, that I still remember, are the names that were in the Reader, the Red Eye, back when they were still around, every single weekend. Henhouse Prowlers, Paradise Waits, Lakeshore Dive, Cornmeal, Spare Parts, like bands that were when you see something over and over and over and over again, it sticks with you, and that consistency and persistence because not every show, as a comedian, I know not every show is a great one. If we
right.
let's take it to a baseball metaphor. If we put my good shows to bad shows as a ratio, I would be barred from Cooperstown. Like there.
That's a funny
But
dual cultural reference there.
Thank you. But at the same time, I would still be incredibly proud of my batting average and my successes, because those high moments, like you just mentioned, that Christmas show, like those are the shows that really, like, you're like, man, yeah, this is something. This is I'm doing something here.
I would like to do that again someday, honestly. Like the band has changed business wise so much, and a weekly show doesn't necessarily make sense. Especially now with one of our guys living in Bloomington, Indiana.
Well, and
But
the Abbey kind of burned down a little bit,
well,
so
yeah,
that
but I mean, there's plenty of venues.
no, of
Uh,
course. I'm just
but I also wonder if there's a scene for that kind of thing. I think it would be different than it was back in those early days. But I miss the weekly show thing. Even though sometimes it felt like a drag, like there, of course, like you're just saying, there were weeks where I was like, but there were many more weeks where I was good about it. And that consistency allowed us to get better in a way and as you know, as a performer, like you can practice all you want at home in front of the mirror. But it's a totally different thing getting on stage. And that's what helped us grow, I think, twice as fast as performers was we were doing it on stage every week. And that's how you get good at performing.
absolutely. And just on that, nightly, doing stand up, I couldn't. I couldn't have put it better myself. I could practice in front of the mirror all I want, record myself, listen to it back. Everything changes when you step out on the stage. And one of the things that consistency also allows, and I would love to hear a little bit about how this played in, because, you know, obviously with bluegrass, we have most of the Great American Songbook, to include a lot of great bluegrass, traditional, written, known bluegrass, covers, etc. But I also am curious, how did you feel that weekly performance consistency? How did that factor into allowing you to improvise in your songs and jam a little bit more? Because you did, while they were tight, like, I mean, bluegrass is generally known for tight compositions, but I remember hearing things sometimes that you guys were doing and being like, but how? Like,
Uh, Boy, my philosophy about that stuff has changed a lot because believe it or not, back when we were playing to hippies, a lot like largely hippies every Tuesday, we didn't improvise all that much. Like everything was worked out to a degree. And it's only in the past 6 or 7 years that I've opened up more to actually improvising on stage. Um, and so, but I do think that part of that world of improvisation has to start at a place of absolute comfort on stage. Like you have to feel in a safe place on stage. And so those early years of playing every week helped put me in a place where I felt comfortable doing that eventually. But where I was coming from a traditional bluegrass sense early on those early days. That's all I wanted to do. The thought of playing progressive or because I'd come from that rock and roll world that was very progressive when we started playing bluegrass, I wanted it to be traditional. And that's why we wear suits. Like that's where that vibe came from because the Bill Monroe, the fathers of bluegrass, they all came from the countryside and they wanted to be taken seriously by city folks. And so that's why they wore suits. Therefore we were in emulating them. We dressed like city folks, even though we were city folks. It's a funny thing to connect that way. But the idea of wearing suits really was an homage to the tradition of the music. And so it took me a long time to want to feel comfortable improvising. Now I love it. But even so, it's even now the improvising we do isn't like what the Grateful Dead did. Uh, it I think my feeling about the Dead was that they really would let shows just kind of unfold the way that they were going to unfold. And our improvisational sections now are, we know where they're going to be, and they certainly take on a life of their own during that section, but it's still a curated part of the set and not like okay, here's the first song of the set. Let's see how the rest of the night goes. I
Mm-hmm.
still don't have the balls to do something like that.
So, in addition to the Henhouse Prowlers, you've also been a part of a program called, correct me if I'm wrong, the Bluegrass Ambassadors. Expound on that a little bit, because you've been playing music all over the world for the last, I think a decade or so. And talk to us a little bit about what that program is and why it means so much to you.
Yeah, so Bluegrass Ambassadors is our nonprofit, and it started. You're right. It's been 10, I think so a little bit over 11 years, something like that. 2014, we got invited to. Well, I forget exactly how it all came about, but we applied for a program called American Music Abroad that is the modern version of what the Jazz Ambassadors program was back in the 1950s. So the elevator pitch for all of this is, Cold War, 1950s, and U.S. and there's capitalism and there's communism in the world, and Russia was starting to see the value in having cultural influence, and they were starting to send ballets and other forms of Russian culture orchestras around the world. And the United States State Department literally had this meeting where they were like, what are we going to do in response to this? And they were like, well, if what's the American version of spreading our culture around the world? And in the 1950s, jazz music was the most important thing going on culturally in this country. And also, jazz music is this amalgamation of all these cultures together culturally. And what was the United States? What is the United States but a amalgamation of every culture in the world? And so they started sending jazz musicians to the farthest reaches of the world to have cultural exchange with people. And there are these incredible stories of Louis Armstrong and Dave Brubeck, and all the best jazz musicians playing in everywhere in the world. And it's really cool, nerdy stuff to get into. There's a great documentary called The Jazz Ambassadors that's you can find on every streaming service. That's really worth watching if you're interested in that at all. But the long and the short of it is that those programs were wildly successful. And as I like to say, and I believe, diplomats realized really quickly that musicians are the ultimate diplomats. And so they continued to do that work. If the United States was trying to find common ground between two cultures, which is what our State Department's job is, they would bring music and art to that part of the world and have people work together. And so that American Music Abroad program we applied for was the modern version of the Jazz Ambassadors program. And so we applied for it and we got it the very first time, which was a miracle. I remember we auditioned in San Francisco for it, and I remember being terrified. And I remember the band that auditioned before us. It was such a wild thing auditioning at that thing, because there's like bands from all genres there, and you're in the green room, standing next to a jazz group or a hip hop group, getting ready, and you get this real microcosm of American culture there naturally. But I remember the band that went before us was also a bluegrass band. You could hear them through the door performing and doing this audition. And they part of the audition for this thing was they gave you sheet music for three different songs that were from three different cultures, and they were like, we want to hear your version of this, of one of these. And we picked the same song as the band that auditioned before us. It was a Chinese song called Jasmine Flower, and it was in G, like, and it was 145. And so we just played the melody. It didn't even occur to me that I saw the Chinese lyrics, and I was like, that's not something we would ever do. And I heard the band before us go in and sing in Chinese, and I was like, oh, we're done. Like, they sang in Chinese. I didn't even think of that we could do that, like, or should, or how. We didn't get it. And I remember just going in. I think because of that, I went in just being like, well, we didn't get this. Uh,
Hmm.
but we auditioned, and I remember the guy, one of the people who was judging us, who became a dear friend of mine, he stopped us before we left. That was when Star Moss was in the band. And Star Moss is this quiet, sweet guy. He was our guitar player. And the guy who was one of the people judging us said, hey, you all sang and talked. He's like, what about you? And he pointed at Star, and he's like, what's your story? And Star was like, I'm from Wisconsin. And he said, all I can tell you is that this band would absolutely love the opportunity to do this work, and it would mean the world to us. And I think that him saying that is what made them select us. And so that first tour they sent us on was to West Africa, which meant the world to me because of my earlier connection to the Gambia. I remember those State Department tours are funny. They like, sometimes you don't find out where you're going till like a month before you go. And I remember we got this email that was like, oh, this is where you're going. You're going to Congo,
Yeah.
Liberia, Mauritania, and Niger. And I remember
What a
calling my
list.
dad. Yeah, I know.
Oh,
I'm like,
wow.
we didn't realize that was going to be the hardest tour we ever did. The very first one was absolutely the most difficult one we'd ever do. And I remember calling my dad when I got that, and he was driving. And, my dad's an Africanist. Like, he's studied that part of the world his whole life. And I remember telling him, I was like, Dad, they're sending us to West Africa. And he teared up, and he was like, you're going to places that I've never been. And that's my part of the world. Like, that's the part of the world that I've chosen to study for my entire life. And it was this emotional bond between us. And so we went and did that tour, and it changed me again. It like, I saw West Africa and different parts of it and felt this connection to that part of the world. And like, we were in Liberia, and not just in the capital, but they drove us 6 hours up into the rubber plantations in Liberia and got to go to parts of just remote parts of Africa and perform. And we were in Mauritania in the Sahara Desert performing, like, just wild stuff. And those experiences of genuinely connecting with people across, I mean, we'd play music. I remember they set us down with people, and they're like, all right, here's the band you're going to play with tonight. We're in Mauritania, where they either speak Arabic or French.
Oh, yeah.
And you've got 90 minutes to figure out how to play music on a stage in front of 1,000 people with them. And none of them speak your language, and you don't speak their language. But you do share a language in common. It's
Music.
just tonal, right?
Yes, but music is. I mean, that's why they call it the universal language. It is something
Yeah,
that
it's a
doesn't
cliche
need
for a reason.
translation. Yeah.
Right. And I remember the incident I'm thinking of in Mauritania with that was like, it's terrifying, first of all. And it was our first tour. So, we had to just kind of be like, well, we're just going to do this. And I remember just like sitting across the table from this band. I had nothing in common with culturally. And I just pointed at the guy's instrument, and I was just like, like, play and I'll play with you, and they did. And we did. And then it was our turn. We played a song and they played with us, and we were like, okay, uh, let's go on stage.
Right. Like, okay,
And
now you get it. We get it. Let's good.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the beautiful thing about that is that we do that. It's terrifying for both bands. You don't know what's going on. Someone's on stage introducing you. You don't know what they're saying. We play music together. The audience loves it. And at the end, you look at these guys and you smile and you feel this connection that has no words behind it, but it has the same feelings. And you better believe that was inspiring, and you better believe that made me want to do it more. And we kept getting invited back to do more. And, at this point, we've been to 31 countries. And that work inspired us to start Bluegrass Ambassadors, the nonprofit, which has evolved into this thing now that is really, it used to be like, oh, let's give workshops and educational programs about parts of the world that Americans don't really get a chance to go to and see in person, because you and I both know how important that is to experience other parts of the world. And often through no fault of their own, Americans don't get a chance to do that. Like, it's not part of they're not privileged enough. They're not, whatever, for millions of circumstances, don't necessarily get to leave America. And so that's great. Giving people firsthand accounts of what the rest of the world is like is always going to be a good thing, especially in the world of media and social media and all that. But the nonprofit's mission has evolved in the past 5 or 6 years to be less about sharing our experiences and more about helping people realize they also have the power to make those connections, and that those connections don't have to be in some exotic land. They can be with your neighbor across the hallway in your apartment complex, because guess what? We still live in this massively multicultural world, especially in Chicago, but also in rural parts of America. And when you realize that you've got the tools in you to be curious about who people are, and also and be an anthropologist yourself, and I truly believe that people connect because of genuine curiosity about each other. And so now we just kind of share that message of like, look, all we do, people look at us like we're wizards. They're like, oh my God, you guys sing in different languages and learn to play music that isn't from America. They think we're magic. We're magicians, and we're not. And we just care and are interested enough to learn. And so now we give workshops and we teach people to sing the same songs that we're singing, and kind of send this message of like, all it takes is a little curiosity, and it pushes past all the bullshit rhetoric that is about, especially now. I work hard not to be political in conversations, because I don't think it takes us anywhere, but there's no denying that there is a American voice or voices right now saying that cultural diversity is bad for America. And that is the biggest load of bullshit I've ever heard. and so that is at the core of what Bluegrass Ambassadors stands for, and what we do. So there's
I try to not be too political either, but I will say that I do agree with you that without exposure to other cultures, by closing doors rather than opening them, we are doing a disservice not just to ourselves and the potentialities that could exist for our own experiences, but a disservice to music as well. Because if you didn't have that open-mindedness, right, to be out there in all of those places in the world that you've been, then we wouldn't be having this conversation, And I think it's a real testament to just the foundational belief in the power of music that and that what you guys do is awesome. Are there any words you'd like to leave us with before we wind down this episode?
No, folks can certainly check out what we do at both henhouseprowlers.com and bluegrassambassadors.org. But I hope that we can keep having this conversation. Like I do, just through the conversation we had before we hit record, I think you and I have a lot more to talk about, because you've seen parts of the world and dealt with cross-cultural challenges in ways that I haven't. And I do genuinely think that your experiences that you were telling me about in Israel are important. And I think important for people like me and other Americans to hear. So I hope that you and I can extend this conversation at some point, because I want to hear more about what you've seen and experienced.
One of the things that's interesting about this show that's different than others is that I do not do any solo episodes. For me, this show is about my guests. It's about the people who are on the show, and where I've gotten the value of getting my stories out there is that throughout the conversations, throughout the dialogue, sometimes in the bits before we hit record, like you just said, I know my stories are getting out there, and you know what? What one of the most beautiful things about this show is that when I have a guest on for the first time, I always let them know, hey, we're just setting the stage to talk about so much more next time you come back on. That's the conversation always continues. The music never stops.
Yeah, and I genuinely would love to do this again and dig more into the cultural exchange and diversity part of it. And I think that it would be a really interesting conversation. And I think we should try to do that.
Yeah, I think
at some point.
I fully agree. I think we barely scratched the surface of because I know in my head I have Rashima, I have a list of like all of like the places that I know you've been and all that, and I know we barely scratched the surface. So there's so much more to talk about, and I have a pretty good feeling that that it's going to happen, folks. Ben Wright from the Henhouse Prowlers, thank you so much for being on the show. This is Steiner. This is Secondhand Talent. It's a podcast. We'll see you next Wednesday.